January 27th, 2020. All right, let's jump into a few articles. I want to hit some good news, some bad news, and then really want to touch on a recent paper that I found that's just absolutely ridiculous in their argument for mandatory vaccination laws. So let us dive right in. Okay. Some good news. All right, so there's been a lot of pressure on industry to clean up the overuse and abuse of RoundUp. Okay, we know it's on the genetically modified foods, the corn, the soy, the canola, the cotton, the sugar beets. So you may be starting to recognize that there's no way you can control your dose of exposure. It's literally in everything. It's in everything. And outside of those foods, it's also used as a desiccant, and it's sprayed on your wheat, your barley, your oats, your rye, and things like that to speed up harvest. Well, here is an interesting paper that just came out today stating that Kellogg's commits to reducing widely used herbicide in the supply chain, but farmers didn't know about it. Right, it's the farmers' fault. They were using it, but they weren't told that Kellogg didn't want them to. Whatever. You can go ahead and read this article, and it talks about how so many of our breakfast cereals are contaminated with glyphosate. Very high levels of Roundup are used. And on one hand, it tries to tell you that, only 3% of the wheat is sprayed with Roundup, right? Pre-harvest application of glyphosate occurs in only 3% or less of the wheat acreage in the United States. And yet, all of these cereals are testing very high levels positive for glyphosate. So that's total BS. I promise you, if you are not purposely buying organic wheat, if you choose to eat wheat and oats, be sure it's organic, okay? The majority is sprayed with Roundup just about a week ahead of harvest so that it can kill the plant and then gives up the grain, and it speeds up harvest, okay? So at least at the surface level, they're acknowledging the problem. We'll see whatever changes. Honestly, I don't care because none of these foods are foods that my family eat. We eat organic versions of all the good stuff. And some of us don't even touch that high carb stuff. It's all sugar and simple refined carbs. So anyway, here's a similar article about General Mills. This one is from several months ago, but still General Mills launches a pesticide reduction plan after traces are found in cereal. We're talking huge amounts found in the cereal. Okay, tons and tons of glyphosate in all of the cereals, but especially oat-containing cereals. Here's a quote. The food industry has long avoided responsibility for the use of toxic pesticides in its supply chains. What General Mills is doing is a welcome step in paving the way to transparency, accountability, and long-term value for the company. So they got away with it as long as they could. Now that more and more people are becoming aware of this toxin and that it's affecting our gut microbiome, it's causing leaky gut, it's causing food allergies, it's causing all kinds of neurological disease, it's causing cancer, which we know it does. Roundup is a huge, huge problem. But don't worry, only 250 million pounds are sprayed every year in the United States. Yes, it is everywhere. It's contributing to the colony collapse of our pollinators. It's destroying the earth. So we need to keep a close eye on this one and continue to hold these massive corporations accountable for what they say they're going to do, because they've been talking about this for quite some time and it's still a problem. This is an article from EWG, and they do a lot of great work around pesticides. This is where you can find, information about the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, but they're constantly doing new tests of popular breakfast cereals and things, and you can see Cheerios. I see Cheerios in everybody's cabinets. And they're some of the worst offenders because of how much oats are in here and that they're sprayed with the Roundup. I mean, Honey Nut Cheerios Medley Crunch, 833 parts per billion glyphosate. Honey Nut Cheerios, 147. Cheerios Toasted Whole Grain Oat Cereal. You think you're making a wise, nutritious choice going with the whole grain? Look at that, 729 parts per billion of glyphosate. Chocolate Peanut Butter Cheerios, 400. I mean, you're getting anywhere from 150 to over 800 parts per billion of glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, in these cereals. And Nature Valley, all of their products, their granola bars, all of these things that are high in oats and wheat are extremely high in glyphosate. So again, pay close attention to what you're eating. Not only is it causing cancer, it's causing all kinds of cascade of detrimental effects in your body. Avoid the toxins, guys. Eat organic. Even organic test positive for some of these things, but at way lower levels. Okay, you're going to at least be reducing the toxic load on your system, and that's important. Now, interesting thing is you start to follow along to safety testing. Monsanto, Syngenta, any of these companies, your Dow DuPonts, I don't care who they are, they number one, they do their own safety testing and provide their own safety tests to the FDA. It's never done by independent studies, and independent studies show huge risk compared to their safety. And an interesting thing also is they're always submitting tests based on glyphosate, not Roundup. And there's a big difference. Glyphosate is the active ingredient, but the entire formulation of Roundup is an entire cocktail of hundreds and thousands of chemicals that combined are much more toxic than just glyphosate alone or any of those other chemicals alone. So there's a great article here in The Guardian that says formulations of glyphosate-based weed killers are toxic, test shows. And there's different formulations depending on the manufacturer. Roundup is just one of them, but they're all toxic in their own right because they're combining multiple different toxins with glyphosate, creating a much more toxic end product in their formulation than just glyphosate alone, which is how they test it, which is still not safe. Monsanto's known about glyphosate's connection to cancer since 1983. There are internal documents leaked that have proved this. So go in, do your research, read about the high levels of toxicity from the final product. That's an interesting thing also about the Seralini study, is they actually use Roundup and not just glyphosate. So keep that in mind. Stay away from the pesticides. Reduce your exposure to all pesticides, not just Roundup. Also atrazine, herbicides. I don't care. You gotta switch to organic any way you can. Do as much as you can and what you can afford. Make it a priority though. Another article, we're asking the wrong questions about glyphosate. And again, this kind of talks more about going beyond just glyphosate and looking at the whole final formulation of the end product and its toxicity. It's another great article. I don't have time to go into it because I have other topics that I want to cover, but there's a lot of great information in here. There's definitely greater toxicity with the commercially available product than there is with any individual ingredient. Obviously, we need to pay attention to that. They're always just talking about the active ingredient. Vanessa Fitzinakis, a toxicologist of Northeast Ohio Medical University who studies the potential of herbicide formulations to increasing the risk of developing Parkinson's disease. Backing this up, the United States Department of Health and Human Services National Toxicology Program recently released information showing that some commercially available formulations containing the ingredient were more potent than glyphosate alone. Okay, so multiple articles that you can find out there that go into great detail about how Yes, glyphosate is dangerous, but the final formulation of Roundup and many other herbicides using glyphosate is much more toxic than glyphosate alone, and that's what's actually sprayed on the food. It's never just glyphosate that's out there being sprayed. It's a formulation in a final end product like Roundup. Okay, so let's move on from Roundup and glyphosate and look at some of the other headlines that have been coming out. Multiple articles about this one telling you, oh, it's genetic after all. Autism is genetic. The largest ever study finds 102 genes responsible for autism. They found genes associated with autism, not responsible for autism. And remember, you have to understand epigenetics and how it works. Just because you have genes for a specific disease, I don't care if it's type 1 diabetes, I don't care if it's autism. Less than 5% of all disease actually comes down to, do you have the gene? It's actually gene expression. And the food that we eat can express our genes or turn them on or off, right? Switching it on is that expressing of the gene, turning it on. So just because you have some of these autistic related genes doesn't mean you're going to have autism. There has to be an environmental trigger or factor that's going to express those genes. So most of the 102 genes were expressed in the brain and affect synapses or regulate other genes. This means they have important roles in switching other genes on and off. And if you've looked at a lot of the studies about non-specific effects of vaccination at an epigenetic level, there is major gene expressions turning on and off of genes, from asthma to diabetes to multiple sclerosis to cancer, post-vaccination. Okay? So it's no coincidence. It is no coincidence that people see this instant regression into autism post-vaccination, because it is triggering the expression of these genes. So while the article wants to tell you it's not the vaccine that's defective, your child is defective, that's not true, okay? None of this has to happen. Diet is one of the biggest triggers for gene expression. So is vaccination. All environmental factors, okay? The air we breathe, they all affect our gene expression. So stop poisoning your body with injections, with crappy food, with dirty water, with soda pop, and all this crap. Eat clean. Support your body's functions naturally with nutrient-rich whole foods that are clean. Okay, that's as far as you need to go. And you can correct a lot of these issues that are genetic in one generation of just, we teach our kids how to eat clean, do right, avoid toxins, stop injecting them with toxins, and their next generation will be healthier. And we can continue that on and turn this whole ship around with patience and dedicated effort. Okay, you can't just take drugs and vaccinate the shit out of people and hope you can turn these epidemics around, because that's the strategy we've been using for a couple hundred years, and things are only getting worse and worse and worse. Another one. Toxic forever chemicals that are found in almost everybody's water supply. So, let's go up here. Oh, there's multiple articles in here that I could click through. This one is actually talking about the neurological damage from soy oil. And it's used everywhere. And it talks a lot about how the soybean oil is the most popular oil, and that it causes neurological changes in the brain, which may contribute to autism and dementia in humans. So the hydrogenated oils, the vegetable oils, all the crap the American Heart Association is pushing you toward is literally destroying your brain. It's also destroying your arteries and your heart. Okay, if you follow the words of the American Heart Association, they'll lead you directly to a heart attack. Cholesterol is vitally important for you. You need good, healthy, saturated fats that are nutrient rich. Stay the frick away from these vegetable oils, the corn oils, the soy oils, especially the GMO, right? Soy, corn, and canola oils. And switch over to a healthy non-GMO, preferably organic, avocado oil or olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, or coconut oil. Okay, these are going to be better polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats that are going to be a better omega profile for you, better for your body. So stay away from soy and soy oils. And this is one that really gets my blood boiling, okay? This is stupid paper brought to you by Oxford academics. And this came out November of 2019, so just a couple months ago. Or I guess published October. Either way, not long ago. And they're bringing out the old analogy of vaccinations are like seatbelts. And because it's such a public health benefit, we should be able to mandate them on everybody. So let's read through their abstract. I mean, this is a really long paper talking about seatbelts and how vaccines are like seatbelts. It's a bunch of crap. So we argue that from the point of view public health ethics, vaccination is significantly analogous to seatbelt use in motor vehicles, and that coercive vaccination policies are ethically justified for the same reasons why coercive seatbelt laws are ethically justified. BS. We start by taking seriously the small risks of vaccine side effects and the fact that such risks might need to be coercively imposed on individuals. And this entire argument 100% hinges on the idea that there is a seriously small risk of vaccines. And that couldn't be further from the truth. There is a massive risk for every individual with vaccines, from chronic activation of your immune system, your neurological degenerative immune response, autoimmune disease, chronic illness. 1 in 2 of our kids, 54% of our children in this country now suffer from chronic illness that didn't used to be epidemic-wide, right? We eliminated infectious disease and we brought on chronic illness for everybody. So there is no way to say that there is a serious small risk to vaccination. It's not even close to putting on a seatbelt, okay? There's no risk of clicking in a seatbelt and becoming paralyzed, clicking in your seatbelt and having brain damage, clicking in your seatbelt and dying, clicking in your seatbelt, okay? The action of putting that seatbelt on, there is no risk, okay? The only risk is if you're in an accident, if that's actually going to save you or hurt you. And yeah, that's different, okay? But it doesn't reduce your likelihood of getting in an accident at all, okay? This is a completely different scenario. The action of getting vaccinated can destroy your life. And the risk of the infectious disease, that's what's small, not getting it. You'll probably get sick. That's not the issue. It's actually having a permanent adverse reaction to that infection. It's very small risk. So if millions of individuals are vaccinated, even a very small risk of serious side effects implies that statistically, at some point, side effects will occur. About 50% of the time or more, looking at our current population. Imposing such risks raises issues about individual freedom to decide what risk to take on oneself or one's children, and about attribution of responsibility in cases of adverse side effects. Seatbelt requirements raise many of the same ethical issues as vaccination requirements, and seatbelt laws initially encountered some opposition from the public that is very similar to some of the current opposition to vaccine mandates. It is not similar at all. It is completely different. Completely different. They're not even in the same category. The analogy suggests that the risks of vaccines do not constitute strong enough reasons against coercive vaccination policies, and that the same reasons that justify compulsory seatbelt use, a measure now widely accepted and endorsed, also justify coercive vaccination policies. You got that? So because it's makes sense to have a law to, if you're going to drive, you need to be in a seatbelt. Now, if you want to live, you need to be vaccinated. Bunch of crap. Now, you guys can go through and read this. Again, Oxford Academics, Vaccination, Risks, and Freedom, the seatbelt analogy. But there's one really important thing here in the introduction. And again, the whole thing hinges on the fact that vaccine injury is rare and a very statistically small event. It couldn't be further from the truth. It happens all the time. It's just never reported accurately. So, addressing the fact that it does happen, still a very small risk, let's just cut that out and say still a very real risk, does not rule out and actually entails that on some occasions, vaccine injury will occur. This is hilarious. Because just listen to what it's saying. Listen to this and tell me you don't see through their bullshit. When this happens, it is very likely, okay, when vaccine injury happens, it is very likely that the victim would have remained perfectly healthy or would at most have caught an annoying infectious disease with no significant complication without the vaccination. Let me read that again to you. It is very likely that the victim would have remained perfectly healthy or would at most have caught an annoying infectious disease with no significant complications without the vaccination. In other words, all these severely injured kids, these kids that died shortly after vaccination, my son with brain damage and severe intractable epilepsy and autism, all these other kids with type 1 diabetes and all these other MS and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who have had these adverse events, well, it's pretty likely that they would have remained perfectly healthy had they not got the vaccination. Straight up says it right there. And then goes on to say, but you still should, it's just like wearing a seatbelt. You got to do it for everybody. And going on about the herd immunity myth and that we need 95% coverage and all this crap. Again, it's bull crap. And none of it is based in reality, in the actual rates of vaccine injury, because there is no real data about it. Less than 1% of adverse events are actually reported. So how can they even write a paper like this justifying a mandate? They can't. This is a consideration that is often evaded in arguments about coercive vaccination policies. We might still be able to justify coercive vaccination policy on the grounds of cost effectiveness or of rational risk-taking, but we cannot simply ignore the risk just because it is rational to take it. So what if a child is vaccinated as a consequence of a coercive policy and against her parents' will, and then the child is so unlucky as to experience some serious side effects of the vaccine, such as an allergic reaction or a disease like Guillain-Barré syndrome? Well, what are the ethical implications of an episode of iatrogenic disease, which is disease caused by the medical intervention? So it goes on and says, well, yeah, this is going to happen, but you know what? There's more risk if we don't do it, which is bullcrap. You're actually healthier getting these infections as a child, okay? So you want to read through it, but this is just some BS propaganda in the form of a journal entry here to try to justify removing our medical liberties to choose out of a procedure that we don't want done, because the risk profile is huge and it's okay to get sick. Now, once you read through this, I want you to jump over to The High Wire by Del Bigtree, okay? Go to videos and sort by oldest, because he's in a couple hundred episodes now. His fourth episode, from May 4th of 2017, actually goes over the whole vaccine seatbelt analogy, and he destroys it. I love it. I highly recommend you go watch this. I'm not going to jump into it. I want you guys to do it on your own, but I can probably just skip through. So he starts with one seatbelt. And we know that that actually is not too restrictive. So you have the ability to steer, you can brake, you can look and see on both sides your blind spots and actually be able to drive. But then you start adding on, well, not just one seatbelt, we need 4 for polio. He starts with polio. Okay, now you got 4 going across here. Now you're super tied down. Now we need chicken pox. Now you need rotavirus. Now you need pneumococcal. Now you need Hib, hepatitis B. You just keep going. While one seatbelt might have been safe and have some risk along with it, what happens when you strap your immune system down with 72 doses? Not only are you triggering chronic immune activation in the brain, in the body, causing autoimmune disease, neurological degeneration, and all kinds of issues, you're tying your immune system down to specific inflammatory reactions that it shouldn't be having. And now you're never going to be safely going down the street being exposed to different viruses and bacteria, and your immune system's not going to know how to handle things outside of what we've tied it down with the vaccine. It's fantastic. You should watch it, and it's the dumbest analogy ever. But this is a great visual as to how they're destroying our immune system with all of this, just bombarding it with shot after shot after shot after shot after shot after shot in these little babies whose immune systems aren't even fully developed. They're causing destruction. Go watch that. So what about just getting sick, right? Isn't that how everybody used to do it? You just get sick. You get the flu. You get a cold. You get an earache. Whatever. You let the body fight it out. You let that fever run. You let the immune system go nuts. You let it do its thing. And what happens after? You come out stronger. So let's look at some of the studies that talk about some of the benefits of actual infection. So here's a study from 2006. It says acute infections as a means of cancer prevention. Opposing effects to chronic infections. Epidemiological studies have found an inverse association between acute infections and cancer development. In this paper, we review the evidence of examining the this potentially antagonistic relationship. Results: exposure to febrile infectious childhood diseases were associated with subsequently reduced risk for melanoma, ovary, and multiple cancers combined, with significant in the latter 2 groups. So having fever-inducing infections as a child reduces your risk for skin cancer, ovary cancer, and many other multiple cancers combined. Epidemiological studies on common acute infections in adults and subsequent cancer development found that these infections to be associated with a reduced risk for meningiomas, gliomas, melanoma, and multiple cancers combined significantly for the latter 3 groups. Overall risk reduction increased with the frequency of infections, with febrile infections affording the greatest protection. So why do we keep rushing to stop the fever and vaccinating to prevent us from getting sick and having these infections? Because it's, what did this paper say? An annoying infection. We don't want to be annoyed with infection, right? So acute infections were beneficial, but chronic infections, which is typically what happens post-vaccination, because there isn't it doesn't elicit a strong enough immune response from the body. So sometimes these things find a way to just live in our body, like the measles vaccine strain that has a chronic infection in the GI tract of a lot of autistic kids. These chronic infections actually have the reverse effect and actually would support tumorigenic growth. So acute infection is key. Here's another study 2015, influenza virus infection elicits protective antibodies in T cells specific for host cell antigens, also expressed as tumor-associated antigens. Most tumor-associated antigens are self-molecules that are abnormally expressed in cancer cells and become targets of anti-tumor immune responses. Antibodies in T cells specific for some TAA have been found in healthy individuals and are associated with lowered lifetime risk for developing cancer. Lower risk for cancer has also been associated with a history of febrile viral diseases. So again, this dives into how when you get a natural infection, it elicits the CD4 and CD8 T cells and just creates this great army of cellular response to infection that gives us the tools we need to fight cancer as adults. Okay? So if they're trying to sell you that there's no benefit to actual natural infection, they're filling you full of crap. Do childhood diseases affect non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and Hodgkin's lymphoma risk? Sure as crap does, especially measles. To investigate the association between non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and Hodgkin's lymphoma and exposure to childhood disease, we analyzed an Italian case control study that included 225 histologically confirmed incidence cases of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, 62 Hodgkin's lymphoma cases, and 504 controls. After adjusting for confounding factors, all examined childhood diseases were negatively associated with Hodgkin's lymphoma, which means you were less likely to get Hodgkin's lymphoma after having childhood disease. Measles was negatively associated with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, particularly follicular B-cell NHL. Our findings provide additional support to the hypothesis that infections by most common childhood pathogens may protect against Hodgkin's lymphoma or at least be correlated with some other early exposure, which may lower the risk of Hodgkin's lymphoma in adulthood. In addition, our study shows that measles may provide protection effect against non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. There you have it, folks. Getting a natural infection in your childhood is going to help you prevent adult cancer in the future. Here's another one. Mumps and ovarian cancer. Modern interpretation of a historic association. Again, epidemiological studies found that childhood mumps might protect against ovarian cancer. So they go on and they find that when you get the mumps, it boosts this antigen MUC1 expression, and that helps fight ovarian cancer. So again, another plus for having these once common childhood infections that were non-lethal, just annoying. Yep, you had to stay home. So whatever. Infections and cancer, the 50 shades of immunity hypothesis. Infectious organisms that are not oncogenic, neither oncolytic, may play a significant role in carcinogenesis, suggesting the need to increase our knowledge about the immune interactions between infections and cancer. It goes on and on, guys. There's so much benefit to natural infection beyond just your lifetime immunity. Vaccine immunity wanes. You're still susceptible to the infection. We see, epidemics and outbreaks of pertussis amongst 100% vaccinated. We see it of mumps, 100% vaccinated. Why not just get the disease without pumping our body full of toxins? Let's think about it. All right, and one last thing I saw on the same website on Oxford Academic, adding lithium to drinking water for suicide prevention. Again, looking at the ethics. So I don't care how beneficial lithium might be to lowering suicide rates, to lowering Alzheimer's, to helping prevent dementia. If the data is really there to support the fact that lithium can be a great mental health booster, great. Let's give it to people as a supplement. We don't have to mandatorily add it to the public drinking water like we did with fluoride, and now we know we're causing all kinds of neurological damage, skeletal fluorosis, bone cancers, skin cancers, lung cancers from the fluoride in the water. Okay? If there's a benefit to drinking or adding lithium, let that be the person's choice to supplement. Okay? And you can go look at the science. Head over to PubMed, type lithium and water, and there's a ton of science out there looking at all kinds of different ways lithium is helping reduce mortality. It's helping, reduce the incidence of dementia, suicidality, all kinds of great things. I've read through a lot of them trying to find a hole, and so far, everything that I'm reading, it looks like it could be a great supplement, but nothing that needs to be mandatorily added to the drinking water. That should never be the go-to. I don't care if it's fluoride. I don't care if it's lithium. I don't care if it's vitamin C. Don't put it in the water, okay? That's up to us as individuals to focus on a healthy diet, to understand the body, and to figure out, would lithium be beneficial to me? And if psychologists and psychiatrists are seeing benefit to it, they can suggest it to the patient and say, hey, here's some of the data. Lithium could be a good supplement for you, and you can try it out on your own. But you do not just roll it out to everybody without thinking about the potential consequences, because you don't know. You don't know what 50 years from now we're going to be going, can you believe what's happened to us because of the lithium in the water? Like we are right now with fluoride, and like we are right now with the amalgam fillings that were safe. Okay? Stop mandatorily pushing these interventions on everybody. We need choice, freedom. This is our body, and there are benefits to taking the natural route, whether it's breastfeeding, whether it's natural exposure to infectious disease, natural diet, whatever. It's our choice, okay? Make sure you're up to date on all the latest information and make the best choice for you. I don't care what that is, but do your research and make your choices for you and your family. All right, guys. That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you have an awesome rest of the January. Bye.